books, Alina Whitfield had been Duchess of Ashcombe for exactly 1 year, and in that year she had discovered the single fact her late husband's family had never bothered to mention. The estate was drowning in debt. She found the ledgers by accident, tucked behind a false panel in the study her husband had never once let her enter while he was alive. 3 generations of Ashcombe men had borrowed against land, sold timber rights twice over to 2 different buyers, and quietly mortgaged the very silver on the dining table. Her husband had died before the creditors came calling, leaving Alina to inherit a title, a crumbling house, and a debt so large it would take a lifetime to repay. She sat on the study floor for the better part of an hour that first night, reading the same page 4 times because she kept refusing to believe it said what it said. Her husband had smiled at her over breakfast every morning of their marriage and never once mentioned that the roof over her head was owned, in every way that mattered, by creditors in London. If you like unraveling a mess someone else left behind, you already know what's coming. She could have wept. She could have written to her brother in London and begged for a settlement. Instead, Alina did something no Duchess of Ashcombe had done in 200 years. She rolled up her sleeves and became her own steward. She learned to read a rent roll before breakfast, sitting at the same desk where the false panel had been, teaching herself from an old accounting manual she'd sent a servant to buy in town under a false pretense, because a duchess ordering her own bookkeeping primer would have been its own small scandal. She rode out to every tenant farm herself, not sending a bailiff, and asked the farmers directly what they needed instead of assuming she knew. Most of them had never been asked that question by anyone bearing the Ashcombe name, and it took weeks before they answered her honestly, instead of telling her what they thought a duchess wanted to hear. It was in untangling those answers against the estate's own records that she discovered half the estate's income had been vanishing into the pocket of a land agent named Josiah Pratt, a man who had served 3 generations of Ashcombes and whom everyone assumed was beyond reproach precisely because no one had ever thought to check. Alina did not assume anything. She spent 4 months quietly cross-referencing his accounts against the tenant's own records, staying up past midnight with a candle burning low, filling page after page with her own tight handwriting. It was during one of those late nights that Gabriel Hart found her. Gabriel was not a duke. He was a barrister from Bristol, the son of a wool merchant, brought in by Alina's brother to advise on the estate's legal troubles. He had expected to meet a grieving widow who needed things explained to her slowly, and had spent the carriage ride from Bristol rehearsing gentle, simplified language for exactly that purpose. Instead, he found a woman surrounded by ledgers 3 feet high, ink on her fingers, hair coming loose from its pins, who corrected his arithmetic within the first 10 minutes of their acquaintance without so much as glancing up from her page. "Transpose the figures in the third column," she said, not looking up. Gabriel checked. She was right. He came back the next week with more papers than were strictly necessary, and the week after that with none at all, simply to ask her opinion on a case he was arguing in town. Alina noticed this. She said nothing about it, because saying something about it would have meant admitting she looked forward to his visits more than was proper for a woman still in mourning. The trouble arrived in October, when Josiah Pratt learned that the Duchess had been quietly building a case against him. He did not confront her. He was cleverer than that. Instead, he went to the other tenants and told them a story, that the new Duchess intended to raise every rent on the estate to cover her husband's debts, and that she had already begun seizing land from families who fell behind. It was a lie built from a grain of truth, which is the most dangerous kind. By the time Alina heard what was being said of her, half her tenants had stopped answering their doors to her carriage. She rode out to the largest farm on the estate, the Averys, and found the gate barred and the family watching from an upstairs window as though she were the one who had wronged them. She sat outside that gate for nearly 20 minutes before she finally turned the carriage around, and it was the first time in a year of managing the estate's collapse that she genuinely considered giving it up. Gabriel found her afterward, sitting alone in the empty tenant hall where she had once hosted harvest suppers, staring at nothing. "I could tell you it doesn't matter what they believe," he said, "but I know you'd rather I didn't lie to you. Then don't." matters. You've built something here worth protecting, and Pratt knows exactly which lie will destroy it fastest. Alina did not go to the tenants with denials. She went with the ledgers themselves, laid open on the tenant hall's long table for anyone to examine, page by page, Pratt's own signature beside every falsified entry. She did not ask them to trust her. She asked them to check her arithmetic, the same way Gabriel had checked hers. It took 3 days. The first day, only a handful of tenants came, standing at a wary distance from the table as though the ledgers themselves might bite. By the second day, word had spread that the Duchess wasn't asking anyone to simply believe her, and the hall filled past capacity, farmers crowding shoulder to shoulder to trace Pratt's signature across entry after falsified entry with their own fingers. By the end of it, the Averys were the ones who rode into town to fetch the magistrate, and Josiah Pratt left Ashcombe before nightfall with nothing but the clothes on his back and a reputation he had spent 30 years building now in ruins. Gabriel proposed to her in March, in the same study where she'd found the false panel, though he had the good sense to wait until the debts were finally cleared. Alina said yes on the condition that he never once assumed he understood her accounts better than she did. He never made that mistake again. If a woman who taught herself accounting to save an estate is the kind of heroine you want more of, stay close. There's another one coming.